You know, there are a lot of victims of crimes in our country, but rarely does law enforcement and our judicial system get together and conspire against an innocent person. I know it happens. There's plenty of instances of false convictions, but you don't ever see um, the 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 judicial system and law enforcement actually conspire to prevent someone from having a fair trial um, in this kind of situation as Richard Allen. It's so obvious, and luckily, many in the public see it and have, you know, realized what's going on here. And so, I mean, people want someone to pay for this crime. That's natural. And it was natural for the jury to want someone to pay for this. And by the judge preventing any sort of exonerating evidence, um, not even allowing his own cell phone data to be entered as evidence because it would prove that he wasn't at the crime scene, not allowing any kind of third party defense, not allowing any exculpatory evidence. It was a foregone conclusion that the jury had to convict him, especially with all the lies that were created to convict him. Um, you know, for the prosecution, the ends justified the means, meaning they first started with the end and said, well, it had to be Richard Allen because he's wearing a blue jacket and he was out at the bridge that day. Like he was there 15 minutes before the crime, before they were kidnapped. Well, that doesn't make him the person that did it. Um, but they started with the ends, meaning, um, we think it was him, and it justified their means. The means were lying, were throwing him in a dungeon and torturing him until they got their false confessions. Um, these were the means that were justified, and what you know they didn't understand is um, their their initial um, mistakes um, by not looking into Ron Logan, who was the actual killer here, and by discounting him, even though his girlfriend many years ago said it was him, recent girlfriend said it was him, his cousin said it was him, identified him as the guy on the bridge, as this guy with this image. They all pointed straight to Ron Logan. The FBI said it was Ron Logan. The FBI said his voice was not inconsistent with Ron Logan. Um, every little bit of data pointed straight to Ron Logan, and they still just refused to believe that. At least Doug Carter, and and so that's how we ended up with the ends justifying the means. Um, there, there's been so much evidence along the way that um, should have been obvious who the killer is. The They found a green scarf in the creek, and they know it wasn't Abby's or Libby's, so it was whoever committed this crime. It belonged to them, and incredibly, it wasn't tested. Um, but let's let's um, let's examine this for a second. The bridge guy didn't was not wearing a green scarf. I've spent probably 1,000 times more time studying these images than any other person alive. I can guarantee you I have. Um, I, it's incredible to me that people did not really study these images meticulously like I have. And so to me, these images are very clear. I can see this is a water bottle very clearly. I've proven that. It, he's wearing a winter camo hoodie underneath this windbreaker that he's got on. And the reason he's only wearing a windbreaker out there was because it was an unseasonably warm day. In fact, Abby and Libby didn't even want to bring jackets because it was so warm out. And no one would be wearing a scarf on a warm day. Not this guy, certainly. Um, this is Ron Logan. He was not wearing a green scarf at this moment. And if you're one of these that believe in multiple killers, neither would anybody else. It was too warm to wear a scarf. But we know that a scarf was found in the creek, and so that logically tells you that whoever was wearing that scarf came back later that night and put that scarf on because it was cold at night. And we know there's only one person that came back at night, and we have proof of it because Ron Logan made and received a text next to the bodies at 8 and 10 p.m. That night. And he would have had a green scarf on at that time because it was cold. And that's how his scarf ended up in the creek. He, in the dark, must have accidentally either grabbed it with the other clothes that he had um, that he was throwing in the creek and must have um, uh, accidentally threw it in the creek as well. And they have equipment now that would be able to um, basically this is a shop vac. It sucks up any sort of DNA and can be collected on any item. They're showing it being collected on clothing, on whatever. Um, and it can detect very, um, you know, minute amounts, or can pick up minute amounts of DNA. So I can guarantee you that when they test that green scarf, and it's a matter of when, because that's the key to solving this crime. But the prosecution didn't want to test it because it would point to someone other than Richard Allen, and they know it. But I feel like the defense at some point will insist on it being tested, and I can promise you right now that that green scarf belonged to Ron Logan. Now, there'll be people that say, "Oh, that they must have just found that scarf. Ron must have dropped it at some point on his property." There's always defenders of Ron Logan that oh, that just leave that nice man alone. Ron Logan was not a nice man. He was an evil man. Even if you don't realize he killed the girls, he was still an evil man. And but even after they test it and it comes back as Ron Logan's, I guarantee you there'll be people defending him and saying, making some excuse up, saying how, well, that he still wasn't the killer. I don't understand it. I think um, I, I just don't. There's so much evidence that it's him, and I sometimes just don't understand how people can't easily see it. Partly because I've spent so much time on this case. For me, it's very obvious who the killer was, and so I try to put myself in other people's shoes who haven't spent a lot of time uh, studying either the case or the images, and I've done both. And and I just don't understand how people can't easily see who this killer was. Um, Michelle, After Dark, did a great job explaining the timeline and how um, from 214, that's when the girls were kidnapped, to 218, they know that Libby took 168 meters, or she walked 168 meters. Um, and um, that distance um, easily put them across the creek and the time. I, this morning, walked 168 meters, and it took me about a minute 35 seconds. So, a minute and a half. Um, and, it took them 4 minutes to do the same distance, and that makes sense. They did go down the hill, which was pretty easy to get down that hill. But they had to cross the creek and they had to go up the embankment. And the creek wasn't as deep as most people think. Ron Logan knew exactly where to cross the creek, and it was knee deep where he crossed. And um, so crossing the creek didn't really take as long as most people think. It was going up that embankment that probably took a little time. So the 4 minutes and the distance um, is um, it, it doesn't make sense that they stayed on the Weber's side um, near the road because they couldn't have unless they were walking in circles the whole time. And so both the distance and the time indicate that the girls had already crossed the creek and were up on Ron Logan's property. And he would have been driving them there, getting them there as quickly as he could, because he knew he was safe at that point. Um, he knew the Webbers were gone, and so there was no one else around that uh, could have seen him there. Now, this distance, most likely, the girls were talking to Ron and refusing to um, follow his instructions. Um, and I believe they probably even walked away at some point, maybe up the hill, up Ron Logan's little hill. And he, for whatever reason, was able to force them to go back. So I think that's what happened here. Um, but but for sure they they were already across the creek, and so the state's timeline does not make sense as far as the whole white van thing. And everyone knew. I've been on this case from the very beginning. We knew from the beginning that Brad Weber arrived home at 3:30, not 2:30, and that was well known from the very beginning of the case. And this whole, you know, um, Dr. Walla and her van story, um, I I imagine what she did was say, um, you know, so yeah, you walked across the bridge and you forced the girls down the hill, right? Yeah, yeah. Uh, and then you um, saw a van and got scared, right? Yeah, yeah, that's what happened. And just planted all this information into, and then when she went and wrote her notes, she destroyed her original notes. But when she rewrote it up, she said that Richard Allen said that he did this, when in reality she was the one feeding him this information, and he was just agreeing to whatever she's saying. And so she could justify that as, well, that's what he said, because he said yes to everything that I told him. Dr. Walla, um, you know, wanted to get in the drama of this case, and um, and was listening to really dumb people. If you have seen the sites that she was listening to, these are dumb people, and um, that says a lot about her. Um, and um, and she was able to do what she wanted, which was to really bring her drama and get involved in this case. And it's sad that um, that ended up being the state's biggest evidence was this van, when in reality um, there was never a van. Brad Weber took his car, and he testified to that. Of course, the judge wouldn't allow his original statement to be questioned by um, the the federal officer that he told it to. Um, she wouldn't let him testify via over the internet. Um, so that this whole state's timeline is junk. Um, just the fact that they were able to just get some random guy to say that, yeah, that's Richard Allen's voice. You know, I've listened to his tapes, and so yeah, I could tell that down the hill is Richard Allen's voice. He's he's not an expert in voice analysis. Um, the FBI said it was Ron Logan's voice, and yet the jury was never told that. Um, I like this image because this is, I think her name is Alexis. She's a news broadcaster, and you can tell that Ron Logan gave her the creeps. Um, he went down and was all too happy to, you know, um, you know, profess his innocence, and but yet he knew where the bodies were. He crossed the tape, the tape that was still up. Um, you know, uh, the this image kind of um, tells you a lot about Ron Logan. He loved acting. He had pretty good acting skills. He took acting in high school because, um, as do many psychopaths, um, they have to learn to act because they don't feel the same as most people. They don't have empathy, and so they have to learn to act like they do have empathy. And so he was a good actor, though. I'll give him that. Um, you know, but when you look back, there were a lot of things that he did and said that really gave it away. Um, Doug Carter's comments. Um, I was reluctant to listen to him even talk, but I'm glad I did because um, he was as nervous as a whore in church when he was up there giving his victory speech, um, because he realized that people are not on his side, and people could see through what happened here. And he was sweating and stammering and spitting and doing his sniffing, of course. But I'm glad that, you know, um, I'm glad that he can see that they didn't just get away with this. That people aren't going to just stand by, and he was even blaming Baldwin and Rosie for you know for people not just accepting this verdict, and it was disgusting. um, and but I'm glad. I'm glad he's on the hot seat. He is the man behind the curtain. He's the one that was pushing this. He tried to deflect it. He tried to deflect away from himself. He said, "Well, I'm not an investigator. I've never been an investigator, but I just supported my investigators. Is all I did." That's not the case. He's the man that's been pulling the strings, um, and he's the one that got Jerry Holman to arrest Richard Allen because he because of his pride. He had said, "Yeah, we're going to solve this case," and he couldn't retire without having some resolution to this case. He didn't care if the guy was innocent or guilty. He just needed someone to pay for this so that he can, claim victory and and um, and retire and walk away and you know wash his hands of this. Um, but yeah, I was glad to have watched um, him stuttering and stammering up there. Um, like I say, I've probably spent 1,000 times longer studying these images than anyone else. And I'm not boasting. It was kind of crazy how much time I spent on it. I'll be honest with you. Um, but I've, I've, well, let me, let me, let me explain a few things while I'm on this subject. I've proven that this is a water bottle, and it was in a separate video. But the sun is reflecting off of the water in his water bottle and striking, that light is hitting his jacket. And there's nothing else that can be causing that but this light bouncing off the water bottle, the water in the water bottle. And so um, this is the key to unlocking the case, the water bottle, believe it or not, because um, with this water bottle, we we can get dimensions, and it not only proves Bridge Guy's height at about 6'1", it also proves we can use those dimensions to prove that this was Ron Logan's cell phone, his flip phone. They're the exact dimensions of Ron Logan's TCL Flip by Alcatel phone. Um, and do it yourself. I challenge anyone to do this. And you can use the dimensions of his water bottle to prove to yourself that that was his flip phone. I've done it. I know for a fact that those corroborate with each other. And so what I used to think was insignificant, oh, he's got a water bottle, big deal. But when I figured out what kind of water bottle it was, a Nalgene water bottle, then everything opened up. It gave dimensions for his height, for it proves that that's his flip phone, and I hope the defense can discover that fact and use that because that unlocks everything, and um, it proves that it could not have been Richard Allen. So I'm I don't accept the verdict. The verdict was um, a conspiracy, um, and and Richard Allen was not afforded a fair trial. Um, I don't know if he's going to make it in prison before he can get a fair trial. I'm praying for him. Um, this is this is a really sad time in our history, that it can happen to him, it can happen to anyone. Thank you for your time.